Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning, and today we've got a rather interesting combo to try out. We've got a shell that's a heavy field load that has actually shown us some surprisingly solid turkey pattern results, and we're going to be running it through two chokes side by side that are technically very similar, but kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum as well. And we're going to find out whether this combo prefers one choke or the other, or if it's pretty much the same based on the constriction, or what happens. Don't really know what we're going to get yet, but it's going to be an interesting test for sure. So for the shells we've got today, I brought out some of these. These are some Remington Nitro Magnum extended range buffered Magnum field loads. They are a 12 gauge 3-inch 1 7/8 ounce payload of lead 4s at about 12-10 feet per second, and you can see the little diagram here on the back. They are not a plated pellet, but they are apparently polished, and they are buffered. They do have a wad in them. So essentially, these are just like your typical nitro turkey shells. I think the nitro turkeys might be copper plated, but I honestly can't remember exactly. Either way, these shells, for being a heavy field load, have actually shown some surprisingly decent performances for turkey patterning. At least the same or better than most of Remington's other lead turkey loads. So we'll see what we can get from them through our two different chokes today. But as for the shotgun we're running, I brought out my Remington 1187. This has got a 28-inch barrel on it, but for the chokes that we're running, we've got two pretty interesting kind of separate ways we can go here. Those being these two chokes. To start off with, we've got a Remington Wingmaster HD Turkey Predator choke, and we've got an Indian Creek. Both of these chokes are a 670 constriction. The 670 might work out well considering those are a heavy field load of lead 4s, but kind of two different ends of the spectrum. This is technically a factory, technically an aftermarket choke here from Remington. There may have been shotguns that came with this from the factory, but this is from the era, say 15, 20 years ago, where they had several different standalone chokes that you could just buy off the store shelf, but were actually made from Remington. We've tested this recently with some surprisingly solid results. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got the Indian Creek. It's also a 670, same constriction, but this is easily 4 times the price. I think I got this choke off of eBay for $24 or something like that. These Indian Creeks are up around the $100 mark. So two ends of the spectrum. Kind of a factory made choke versus kind of a fancy aftermarket choke. Same constriction. Which one is going to do better with these? I don't know, but we're going to see if one is clearly the winner over the other. But for today's test, we're running everything the same as usual. I've got both turkey targets set up down there at 40 yards side by side with the chronograph as well, so we can get our velocity. So let's get you guys to view those targets. We'll shoot both of our shots through both of these chokes, and let's just see which one wins out, or if it's just a 670 constriction and they're pretty similar patterns overall. I have a feeling we may see some big differences, but which choke is going to win, I don't know yet. So let's see what we can actually get from them. Alright, so quick look through our chrono numbers. Boss claim is 12:10 for these, however both of our shots were up close to the 1300 mark. Our Remington Wingmaster choke gave us 1272, and the Indian Creek gave us 1323, so that averages out right about 1300 or so. From what I remember, these shells are usually upper 1200s from our previous testing with them, and that's obviously plenty good enough for what the shell is to kill a turkey out to 40 yards. But did we actually get two good patterns from them or not? Let's go check it out and see. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard papers, and we see some pretty interesting results here. I definitely think there's a winner for sure, but there may be a little bit of splitting the difference that we wind up doing between these two patterns. Over on the left, we have our Remington Wingmaster HD Turkey Predator choke, and on the right, we have our Indian Creek. Both are 670 constriction, and I do think there's a noticeable difference. We'll start over here on the left with our Remington Wingmaster choke, and you can see that yes, indeed, we do have a dead bird at 40. There's one through the brain and a couple more down towards the bottom of the spine. However, I think our core favored just a touch to the left in front of that bird's neck. Overall, pattern wise, it's nothing special to write home about, but for a Remington load, this is pretty much on par. We've seen better patterns from these shells for sure, but this still isn't really too bad. This is a Remington choke. You would imagine that they probably tested it with several different types of Remington shells, even if that choke was technically intended for the Remington Wingmaster HD lineup of shells. They call it a turkey choke, so I'm sure they tested turkey shells through it as well. This is 40-yard capable for sure, but I don't know that I would push it a ton farther past that with these particular shells. It's a decent pattern. We've got a core for sure. It's definitely noticeable over towards the left, but everything else is still a little splotchy and a little strung out around the edges. These are a heavy field load, not technically a turkey shell, so that is kind of to be expected, but it's on par with Remington performance most of the time, so it is good enough to do the job for sure. But now moving over to the right with our Indian Creek, remember it's the same constriction. Both are 670. I measured both and they are true 670s. We still have a dead bird at 40. There's a number of them through the spine that would have done the job. Our pattern might have favored a touch low with that Indian Creek. Not uncommon for those chokes. It seems to pattern a little low sometimes, but the pattern I think we have here is definitely a little bit more broad than what we saw with the Remington Wingmaster choke. We don't have as good of a core, I don't believe. Definitely it doesn't look like we have a dedicated hot spot like we did with that other choke. It's decently even. There is a decent little void though right off the right bottom corner there of that turkey target, and we still kind of have the same little bit broad, a little bit splotchy or stringy around the very far edges, so nothing too out of the normal. However, I think the Remington choke is actually going to win out here with the numbers. Maybe this Indian Creek might have a touch more consistent pattern throughout the entirety of the spread, but I think the Remington Wingmaster choke is the better turkey pattern. So let's pull both of these targets down. I'll finish drawing all of our circles and count some pellets, and we'll really see which one actually performed better. And I don't think it's the expensive Indian Creek. Okay, here we have both of our targets actually circled and measured and counted, and we definitely see some pretty interesting results between these two patterns. There is a difference. I think one is still a touch better than the other, but it's not quite as drastic numbers-wise as what I might have initially thought. We'll start again with our Remington Wingmaster choke. We have a 10 and a 20-inch circle. Everything is measured and counted. Inside of the 10-inch ring, we have 76 pellets. And inside of the 20-inch ring, we have an additional 76 more pellets. It's a pretty even spread throughout the core area. I do think the top half of the 20-inch circle is a little bit thinner than the bottom half, but it's a decently even hunting pattern there that is absolutely capable out to 40 yards to kill a turkey with it. Still don't think I would prefer to push it much past that, but anywhere 40 and in, that's going to be a hammer for sure. Turkey's not going to make it through that. Now, yes, outside of our 20-inch ring, we still obviously have a bunch of little stringy flyers and stuff around there to look into, and that's not really too much of a surprise overall. Again, I think we have seen a touch better from these shells than what this gave us, but it's still a pretty solid pattern for what the shell actually is. And this choke is not expensive. You can buy them off eBay for under 30 bucks, and for a stock factory made Remington choke, I'll take that all day long. It is absolutely capable enough to do the job on any average turkey hunting scenario. Now moving over to the right with our Indian Creek choke, we've got the same 10 and 20-inch circle. Within the 10-inch ring, we have 62 pellets compared to the 76 we had with the Remington choke, so not quite as hot of a core area. That's exactly what I was looking at a minute ago when we actually had our turkey targets up. The Remington choke does have a better core, or at least more pellets through the core. This one is still even. It is still capable to 40, but not quite as many pellets. In our 20-inch ring, we pick up an additional 76 pellets, which is exactly the same amount as we had with our Remington choke, 76 more pellets. So not really any massive difference here. Maybe the edges outside of that 20-inch ring might be a little more condensed in than what we saw with the Remington choke, or at least a little bit less sporadic, but numbers-wise, in the 20-inch ring, it's the same, and in the 10-inch core, it's not quite as good as what we saw with that old Remington Wingmaster choke. So pretty interesting results. Still a very capable pattern. I would hunt it within 40 yards, but maybe not technically quite as good. So definitely a pretty interesting comparison here. $25 technically factory made Remington choke versus a $100 aftermarket Indian Creek. Same constriction, not a massive difference in pattern. And I bet if we really took 20 shots out of each one of these chokes, they would probably kind of bounce back and forth and be pretty similar overall on average. But technically speaking, I think the Remington over there on the left might be a touch better with these particular shells anyway. This is obviously one shot with each choke. Things can change on average, but I'm saying the Remington probably squeaked out the win for today if you were comparing these two. It's got that touch hotter core area while still having the pellet count within your 20-inch leeway ring. So not bad for either combination overall. Pretty typical Remington stuff here, even though they're not technically a turkey load. They're both still capable of doing the job, even if they're not the best turkey shell out there on the market. And here are your two wads out of those shells. Pretty basic Remington equipment. Same stuff they use in like the Remington Nitro Turkey or the Premier Magnum Turkey lineup as well. On the left, you have your Remington Wingmaster, and on the right, you have your Indian Creek. You can see the Indian Creeks always have these little stripes up and down the side of them, and usually they're a little more torn up. The Indian Creek chokes, the porting on the side, really doesn't do well with actually maintaining a very nice, clean, perfectly uniform looking wad. You can see there's less pinholes and stuff with the Remington one over there on the left. Overall though, I'm not concerned with either one. Both of them did their job the way they were supposed to, so nothing out of the normal to see here. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that combo right there? Definitely pretty interesting little comparison here. We've got a $25 choke, that's technically a factory offering, versus a $100 aftermarket offering. Not really much of a difference, at least in this test with these particular two shells. They're both the same constriction, and I think they're pretty nominal for difference. Technically, the Remington gave us a little hotter core, but the rest of the patterns really aren't that different. The 20-inch ring is the same on both. So either which way you look at it, is the Indian Creek worth 4 times the price? If you're running this particular shell and you happen to have one of those old Remington Wingmaster chokes already, I don't know that it is. Now, obviously, this could be a completely different story if you run TSS through it or something like that. That Indian Creek may really come into its own. But with a basic, heavy field load like this, I don't know that there's a whole lot of real difference from them. The numbers don't really lie here. Either one is capable to 40, but if I had to choose, I'm probably going to go with this Remington. It's cheaper and has a little better core to it. So, a little surprising of a result today. I expected we'd see a little bit more different of a result from each of these. I figured it'd be a little more clear of a winner, but I genuinely thought it could be a toss-up between which one of these does better. So let me know your thoughts down below. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these Remington Nitro Magnum shells? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? Do you have or run either one of these chokes? And if so, what kind of results are you getting for those? And what kind of shells are you putting through them? And which one of these options would you take? Which one won? Which one would you prefer to hunt with? Let me know all that down below, as well as maybe what other similar testing do you want to see with either those shells or these two chokes. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All the information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.